Hello, it's Reija and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my December 2020 wrap-up, and I have to say it was a royal flush. Basically every single book that I read I rated 4 stars, so you know, it was a magnificent reading month in terms of quality. So without further ado, let's get started. The first book that I finished in December was Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark. This was Clark's latest publication. It was published in the end of 2020, and I have to say that it was so good. It was like watching an episode of an established TV show. It was very cinematic in terms of its action and pacing. It was very easy for me to picture all of the characters, and even with its short length, because it's a novella, P. Djeli Clark manages to really establish these characters and gives you these very subtle cues as to what these characters are like. In ways with they communicate with each other, how they talk to their elders, how they wind down after a night killing monsters, etc. You get those subtle cues that showcase the character's personality in a very interesting way. And it was also very scary. It was horrific, and it was tinged with body horror and just gore. And I'm here for that. I enjoy this type of cosmic horror-esque type story. And yeah, it's basically about this group of black women who are monster hunters, and essentially they are hunting monsters that have infiltrated the Ku Klux Klan. You have the Klan, that's, the Ku Klux Klan, but then you have monsters within the Klan that are called Ku Kluxes, and these women are hunting those monsters. They're basically kind of like beings from another dimension, so to speak. And yeah, I really enjoyed this story, and my only gripe with it is that it does this thing in the end where there's an epilogue and it kind of leaves you with a sort of cliffhanger and sort of like a sales pitch for the second book, if there's ever going to be one, which kind of diminished its ability to stand on its own 2 feet. That is something that I generally do not like, especially if the book is sold to me as a sort of standalone. It's when it tries to have that sort of sequel sales pitch at the end. But I really enjoyed this book. Highly recommend. If you can stomach some body horror and if you are capable and emotionally prepared for, heavy topics such as racism and, heavy use of racial slurs, etc., then I think you should pick this up, because it's one of the better books that I've read this entire year. And then I was on a P. Djeli Clark kick, and I finally read his short story, A Dead Gene in Cairo. I have previously read The Haunting of Tramcar 015, which I really enjoyed, but I hadn't read the prequel to that story. And now that Djeli Clark is coming out with a full novel in the alternative Cairo universe, I wanted to finally read A Dead Gene in Cairo, and I really enjoyed it. It was just as imaginative and interesting and intriguing as everything else P. Djeli Clark has written, but I could definitely tell that he has gotten so much better as a writer after writing that story. I think it's a little bit unfair unfair of me to compare his short story to his like longer works, but I just feel like his more newer works have more cohesion and even more of flair with the way he does his world building and such. So I thought that A Dead Djinn in Cairo was good, but it kind of felt like an on-the-rails adventure. Sort of like you have a video game and you never really take any departures from the core storyline. That's what A Dead Djinn in Cairo felt like. So it was a much more of a narrow narrative than what I've gotten used to from P.J. Clark in the past. But I still enjoyed it a lot, and I enjoy the Cairo universe. So it's basically a story about a detective called Fatima who discovers a dead djinn who has apparently committed suicide, and this is very unusual, and she opens up like an investigation on it, and yeah, it's fantastic, but not my favorite thing of P.J. Clark that I've read. Then I read Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler, and I have to say that I am fast becoming really enamored with Octavia E. Butler. This is the second book of hers that I've read, and I really enjoy her concepts and her ways of coming up with these sort of thought exercises on what the world might look like and how people will react in those settings and stuff. Like, Octavia A. Butler is like, she really handles the humanity of these situations really well. But at the same time, her works are very violent and brutal, so they're not the easiest for me to read. For example, content warnings for this book include rape, violence, starvation, gang violence, drug use, murder. Like, it has a lot of things that it does. Also, like, religious topics such as converting other people to like religion and like establishment of a cult, essentially. But it's so interesting, and the character of Lauren Olamina is very complex. She is a survivalist, a pragmatist, but she also sort of carries within her this need to share her worldviews with others and also sort of conscript others into her worldview. So she's a very complex person. And this takes place in the near future, where the United States has basically sort of unraveled. There's still a government, and but the government is very distanced and sort of out of touch with the way people are actually living their lives, and people are living in this like, either people are well off enough that they are living in gated communities, and like rich people are living in gated communities with like security guards, etc., or people are living in the streets in squalor and poverty. And there is no safety network if people drop out of society, essentially. And this era is marked with like increased violence and diminished options for people to get out of poverty, essentially. Education has completely been shuttered down. Like, people are essentially homeschooling their kids with limited resources, and there is basically no hope for people to get a proper education and get out of poverty. Yeah, this book essentially is about survival, it is about catastrophic climate change, and it is about one person's dream to effect change in the world, and her ambition to become someone who is important. Essentially, this is the first book is the starting point of Olamina, her drive, the starting point of her religion, the Earthseed. And it's interesting because when I was reading this, I was kind of, because of my own experiences with religion, I was very anxious. But I also was nodding along and being like, oh yeah, I can totally see how this sort of religion, or more like a pragmatic philosophy, could work. So that was very interesting. And then, after I finished this, I immediately went and read The Parable of the Talents. And Parable of the Talents, basically, it has multiple points of view, and Parable of the Talents basically deconstructs everything you knew about Olamina in the first book by presenting her from other points of view. So you get to see that she is not necessarily the most altruistic person, that she has her sort of own motives, but that doesn't necessarily mean that her ideas are all bad. And it's so interesting. The second book is definitely more violent and more gruesome, but I actually enjoyed the second book more. I feel like because it had those bits with other characters and perspectives from other characters, it kind of gave a more cohesive picture of the whole world and the whole narrative. And I enjoyed these books a lot. I still think that Kindred is my favorite Octavia E. Butler book that I've read so far, but these were so good. And I also recommend the audiobooks, because what I did was that I listened to the audio from Scribd, and I read through the physical book at the same time. And then when I got to Parable of the Talents, I was listening to the audio and reading the digital e-copy of the text at the same time. And I found that that was a very good way for me to retain as much as possible from the story. And I underlined and annotated a lot when I was reading this book. So yeah, I feel like these books are very thought-provoking. They kind of make you question your own biases and question the way you view the world. And they also offer a very sort of sinister but realistic way, a realistic depiction of a possible future in our world. We are heading to this direction, and it was very harrowing to read about it. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed and liked these books, so would recommend. After I finished Butler's works, I read Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. I have a bit of a history with this book. Shelby from Read and Find Out gifted it to me about a year ago, and it was so nice of her. And I started reading this when I got this, and then I put it down, and then I started buddy reading it again with Krish Bookie's Cauldron, and I put it down. And then I decided in December, okay, you know what, I'm finally going to pick it up and I'm going to finish it. And finally I was in the right mindset, and I was in the headspace where I could just take my time with this and enjoy this. And I'm glad I did, because this was so good. The pacing is incredibly slow. I feel like that's the thing where people might trip up with this book, because I said in my Goodreads review that the pacing of this book is like wading through molasses, which might annoy some people. For me, I actually really like that. I like that we take a lot of time to get to know all of the characters. This is a very introspective book, and we spend a lot of time in Meher's head. And also Meher isn't like your typical fantasy heroine. She's very introspective. She's very sort of social, and the way she works is that she befriends people and gets to know people and then tries to affect her surroundings through the people that she meets. Yeah, so she has very covert and subtle ways of navigating through the world. So I feel like if you are used to more action-packed, assertive female heroines, Meher might seem like she is very meek and passive, but that's so far from the truth. It's refreshing to me that we got this female heroine who is basically kind of super feminine and subtle about her use of power, and also fully acknowledges the ways in which she has blind spots in her knowledge, and because of the way she was brought up as a noblewoman in a very sheltered environment. And yeah, this is basically the title basically says it all. It's an empire of sand. It is an empire built on dreams and built on the blood and sweat and tears of other people, and how that is a sort of crumbling sandcastle that can't last forever. And yeah, that's basically all this book is about. And I love the magic system. I love the incorporation of dance and ritual as the sort of magic of this world. I can't wait to read the second book. Justine from I Should Read That gifted it to me for Christmas, and I can't wait to pick it up. And yeah, highly recommend this book if you like slow building, character focused fantasy that's very introspective. Yeah, I feel like if you like those things, you might like this. And the final thing that I finished in the month of December was The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I listened to this on audio, and I feel like everyone and their mother has been talking about this book in the past year, and I was very skeptical and anxious about getting to it because I felt like it just couldn't live up to the hype for me. But I am very pleased that I read this book. The writing style reminds me very much of Douglas Adams and even a little bit of Terry Pratchett. It's very sort of snarky, sarcastic, but not mean-spirited. It was very fun, and the way the audio narrator Daniel Henning did the voices was so much fun. I especially loved the voice he did for Linus Baker's neighbor, Mr. Crabble. It was great. I will say that T.J. Klune tends to lean very much into the whimsy and seems to really enjoy the sound of his own jokes, because sometimes he repeated some of the jokes and punchlines from earlier parts of the book, and I was like, okay, calm down, I get it, you think you're funny, just ease down a bit. But overall, I found that this book was very charming. It talks about children growing up in institutions. It talks about diminished possibilities for these types of children that are institutionalized and can't get the same opportunities and the same sort of life experiences as people who are living in like families. And it talks about the importance of having a family and of being respected. And it talks about the responsibility of government to make sure that these children are taken care of. And it also talks about prejudice. And it's so interesting because it talks about so many important topics while at the same time having huge amounts of whimsy about it. I really enjoyed this book, and I am so glad that I finished my 2020 on a high note by reading it. And there you have it. Those are all of the books that I finished in December of 2020. Tell me in the comments, have you read any of these books? Are you interested in picking any of them up? And leave me a flower emoji down in the comments so I know that you were here. And yeah, I will see you in another video very soon. Bye bye!